as I if I see the participants list, I see sustainability folks, marketers, supply chain leads, certification professionals, and so on and so forth. Well, and I hope you're all here because you felt it, right? That itch when a brand says something that sounds good, but something's off. So I'm going to share my screen right now, and I only have one screen over here in my little office in Buenos Aires. So I'm not going to be able to see the chat box constantly, but please feel free to drop any question in the chat box. You're also allowed to interrupt me, when you have like a super urgent question. And I guess Saf is gonna help me in case there's an urgent question in the chat box. Please interrupt me. So I'm gonna share my screen.
I wonder, Kyle,
Okay.
if you wouldn't mind chirping up if there is a question in the chat box. For some reason, with my transcribe and my record button on, I'm unable to see the chat. Would you mind doing that, Kyle?
Yeah,
Just
of
kind of
course.
thank you. Thanks.
Super. So can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. Dear fellow skeptics, today, hopefully, is not the 10 Ways to Be Sustainable workshop or webinar by Fashion Declares. And I think in general, Fashion Declares doesn't offer these kind of workshops and webinars. I hope you won't leave with a checklist. I hope you will all leave with a kind of framework to dissect claims, further a map of the legal landscape that actually matters in 2026, because we all know a lot of laws and regulations have been introduced over the course of the last 2 years with regard to greenwashing. And I hope you will leave kind of with a way to talk about your work without falling into saviorism. So here's the schedule of today. First of all, three forms of greenwashing: vague, misleading, irrelevant. We will practice on real ads. Secondly, social washing, global self shaming, and the so called transparency trap. And the third topic will be about the new stuff, right? The lawsuits, discovery, and why your or our general counsel now outranks your head of sustainability. And last but not least, we're going to talk about so-called business saviorism, the corporate form of white saviorism, and how to communicate with humility, not heroism. So let's go. These three make up a huge chunk of green claims. Let's define them fast before going into analyzing actual advertisement. So first of all, vague. Vague, if there's a vague claim, it means that words are used with basically no legal definition, like eco-friendly, green, natural, right? These mean nothing on their own, without context. They are basically designed to make you feel good or make us feel good without telling us anything. Then there are so-called misleading claims. Yeah? Misleading claims or misleading words depend on context. So a claim can be partly true, but still misleading overall. For example, I don't know, made with 50% recycled plastic. But the question is the other 50% is virgin polyester from fracking. And furthermore, the garment, as we all know, might shed microplastics in every wash. So, made with 50% recycled plastic is true in part, but misleading in whole, right? And then there's irrelevant claims. Those might be true, but they're actually unimportant given the overall context. For example, saying or claiming that we've reduced water use in our dyeing process by 20%. Well, this is great, but if 50% of your footprint is from, for example, raw material extraction or farming or end of life incineration, that 20%, right, is irrelevant to the product's overall impact. So this is like an overview of the big three claims, which in the UK Green Claims Code, as well as in the MCO, the EU MCO directive, as well as the Green Claims Directive. Who knows if this will ever be, introduced. In the EU, but where we need to be very careful and we need to, well, we already had to start dissecting those claims many years ago, but we need to do it right now or from now on. So let's practice. Look at this one about cotton. I would like to ask you, what do you see? Can you read it? It's a very small pic picture, or shall I quickly read it, what it says on the slide?
Can you read it?
So, yeah. So basically, it's an ad or a material description from Patagonia, okay, from Patagonia's website. On the right side it says organic cotton, right? 48% the reduction in CO2 emissions when cotton is grown organically compared to conventional methods. This switch supposedly also saves 91% in water use. So again, I would like to ask you, what do you see? Is it vague, misleading, irrelevant? Please use the chat box. I'm able to open the chat box. Wow. And I'm going to give you 30 to 45 seconds. And then I'm going to read a couple of responses out aloud. Alice, it's talking about the switch, but it's not specific to their brand and practices, right? So it's a little vague, right? Let's see if anybody else has an opinion. Irrelevant claim about the water use. Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Specifically when we talk about organic cotton, right, and water use, because like the amazing thing about organic agriculture is the reduction or that we are not allowed to use synthetic and hazardous pesticides and fertilizers, right? So, with regard to water use, in the best case scenario, organic cotton doesn't contaminate groundwater, right? So the water use is, it depends to whom we talk, not so important or partially irrelevant. Exactly. All right. I'm going to go to the next slide. Thanks for your responses and for co-analyzing and co-thinking. Everything you noted down in the chat box is true, and I would definitely agree. So I would even summarize that the claim isn't even a claim. It's more of a deflection because we all know that cotton's impact vary, right? And if a brand uses that to avoid giving their specific cottons data, they are basically communicating something misleading. And we all know that the data Patagonia is using here, and I mean, this is Patagonia, right? Is data which is more than 10 years old, right? From an LCA, what Textile Exchange has published, I think even in 2014. So under the EU MCO or the UK Green Claims Code, cherry picking positive aspects without negative impacts won't be allowed anymore either. So that's huge. I'm going to go to a next example. I'm going to read out the claim again. This is from a denim. And it says from a denim product, our indie good collection now includes black denim options, crafted with 99% less water than the conventional denim crafting process. What's not to love about it? Yeah. So this one as well, right? Uses 99% less water and supposedly less chemistry. Sounds specific at first sight. That's good, right? But look closer. What is it? What do you think? Vague, misleading, or irrelevant? Um, as this ad doesn't adopt a life cycle approach and is only referring to one step, right? The crafting or like one part of the wet process, of the dyeing process of a sulfur black denim. So we could ask, what about cotton farming? What about what happens when you wash the denim? Also, conventional denim, based on which baseline? No data is provided here. And again, under the EU Green Claims Directive, under the UK Green Claims Code, you can't use aggregate scoring that hides trade-offs. So this claim would struggle again under the new circumstances. Next one, last practice. This one from, I do not even remember from which brand, but it's about plastic bottles, PET bottles. What do we see here? We see a supposedly recycled polyester jacket made from recycled bottles. How would you analyze that? Vague, misleading, irrelevant? I'm going to have a look at the chat box if there's any interaction here. Even the name is kind of misleading. Yeah, also, but I think you were referring to the further ad, Louise. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to the next slide. So this ad over here shows supposedly specific environmental metrics, right? Such as the lower CO2 emissions, but it doesn't, again, it doesn't contextualize. It doesn't provide a holistic view of the overall environmental impact, right? And it doesn't even show the baseline, right? The former ad at least added, compared to conventional manufacturing. So, yeah, again, this ad, I would say, is a combination of vague, misleading, and partially irrelevant, right? So, we are finishing with the first round of, the three major claims which need to be dissected under all those new greenwashing legislations. And green claims get most of the attention, right? Under all of these new legal infrastructures. But I don't know if you've heard of, for example, social washing. Because social washing, at least in my humble opinion, is just as dangerous as greenwashing. Today, I would like to focus on two: social washing, or on two other forms of washing: social washing and so-called global south shaming. Because from what I like analyze and see, um, they are the ones who constantly show up within the world of fashion communication. So, social washing is basically when we talk about, or when brands talk about fair wages or ethical production without actually changing the power structures. I would say transparency is not justice. Just because you disclose that your supplier pays below minimum wage doesn't mean you fixed it, right? And with regard to global self-shaming, this might be a new term for most of you, but I must admit it's one of my personal pet peeves. Um, Global self-shaming is when a brand implies that production in Bangladesh or Vietnam is inherently bad and production in Portugal, for example, or Italy is inherently good. In my opinion, that's not ethics. That's basically geography as a moral shortcut, right? So let's dissect some of the major myths within the world of social washing. The first one is transparency is not justice. Well, you can be totally transparent about exploitation, but that doesn't make it okay, right? Mm, mm. Disclosing your list of suppliers doesn't make you the brand who has conducted a proper due diligence risk assessment. Okay. Made in Europe is a safe haven. Gosh, I'm so tired of this one, but yeah. Nowadays, there's widespread evidence of wage theft, undocumented labor, and unsafe conditions in European garment hubs, right? Italy, Portugal, Eastern Europe, and so on and so forth. And then the last one, brands pay fair wages. Most of the brands who don't own their own manufacturing sites don't pay wages. The suppliers do. Brands pay prices per piece of garment, right? So if the price is too low, in general, the supplier has to cut labor costs. So when a brand says we support fair wages, but negotiates prices down by 50% every season, that's social washing. So I know that these three claims or perceptions, right, within the world of supposedly sustainable fashion, they are uncomfortable, but they are very true. So let's collectively have a look at a couple of other forms of washing. Look at this one. What do you see? How would you describe it? Social washing, woke washing, global self-shaming. What are your thoughts? Let's have a look at the chat box. Is there any new one? Global self-shaming, Clara. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Right. I don't see you, but thanks to the chat box, I feel that you are there and attentively listening and participating. Suri says, I don't even understand what they are saying. Yeah, I also don't understand what they are saying. So as you have all been naming it already, this is textbook Global South shaming. Fair fashion made in Portugal versus very low prices made in Bangladesh. The implication over here is supposedly Bangladesh equals exploitation and Portugal equals fair, right? But that's not true. That's not entirely true. There are also excellent work-owned factories in Bangladesh. SAF knows that and works with a couple of them, for example. And there are sweatshops in Portugal. Yes, in Portugal. So the problem is buying practices, not countries or not entire countries, right? So shaming a whole nation is lazy, colonial, and clear global South shaming. So normally I always wish to support like smaller brands, but in this case, the Orilabo project, it's a small brand from my hometown in Germany, and they basically launched a whole campaign, right? With different posters and different claims comparing their supposedly fair production in Portugal to something not so fair in Bangladesh, right? Another poster was even like, if I would be made in Bangladesh, I would be made by children. So I contacted them and like told them, obviously, I confronted them and told them, well, listen, people, this is not ethical at all in terms of marketing. But I also offered my help, and they actually reacted in a really defensive way. So only after that, I was like, okay, fuck it. I need to use them, as one example of global South shaming. So yeah. Next one. We'll move fast. What do you think about that one? Social washing, woke washing, global South shaming. What are your thoughts? Very vague. Yeah. What was woke washing? Oh, I can go back, but I can also quickly explain it. So woke washing is basically um, when we use like the stereotype of Gen Z linguistics, or when we misuse and abuse um, the linguistic of like queer communities and queer folks, we all want to be progressive and woke, but we abuse and misuse this in communication. So we pretend to be woke, right? And progressive. But we're actually not, because again, we're not changing anything with regard to power structures. Woke, social washing, not global South shaming. Surely they are praising themselves for recycling? Question mark. Irrelevant reference claim. Yeah, exactly. It's a combination of all of this, right? So, first of all, it's vague. And secondly, it's also just wrong, right? It's not that only the PET bottle is warming the planet and the recycled polyester jacket isn't at all, right? There's an impact. There's an overall impact also with regard to using recycled polyester, right? So this is definitely wrong, and in scientific terms, it's also wrong. And then it's clear greenwashing, because we all know where recycled polyester from PET bottles comes from. We are not saving any PET bottles from the landfill, right? We are taking PET bottles from existing circular streams, okay, from countries, Germany, Taiwan, Korea, okay, we are taking them out of the existing PET recycling system and making a yarn out of it, where we until today don't have an end-to-end solution to. So, yeah, this is another added, oh, sorry, wait. I'm struggling a little bit with the logistics over here on Zoom. Here I am again. So, Saf, how are we with regard to timing? What
Yeah,
time is it?
we're doing fine. We're doing fine. Yeah, another 30 minutes. We need to get into kind of Q&A type of time, but yeah, how are you doing? How
I'm
far?
good. I'm good.
Yeah?
Everybody in the room as well? Okay, awesome. All right. So, last shift or almost last shift, next shift, after we've dissected a couple of green claims and also had a look at a couple of examples of social washing and global south shaming. Um, Everything we've talked about so far, vague claims, misleading ads, social washing, I think brands have been getting away with for years, but that is changing now. And this is eventually where your research, because I think there's also or a couple of journalists over here, where your research and mine might come together. So as I wrote here on the slide, forget ESG scores, forget sustainability report cards. From what I have been observing, the first month of 2026, the only honest measure of a brand's impact is the docket of a courtroom. Because we all know that the fashion industry has been ranking itself, right, on self-reported data, voluntary data, very carefully worded commitments. But now, class action firms have refined their playbooks. The UK Green Claim Code, the UK's Green Claim Code, the EU's MCO directive, and also the CSDDD, right? The European Supply Chain Law, are giving plaintiffs, lawyers, a foothold, finally. And discovery, and I define it as the legal process where you have to hand over internal emails, you as a brand, for example, is doing what audits, within the scheme of certifications and compliance never could. Let me show you what I mean. So, there's three types of cases which I redraw with my colleague from the CRISPs, my colleague with whom I'm writing the greenwashing newsletter for the fashion industry. And each one is different, or is a different way brands are getting held accountable. The first one, very classic greenwashing class actions. These are consumer or investor lawsuits, okay? And there's a clear pattern. A brand makes a claim. The claim is false or unsubstantiated. And discovery reveals, for example, internal emails knew the truth. There's a couple of examples from last year, for example. You can also read about it in the issue of the last greenwashing newsletter from the CRISPs I shared in the beginning in the chat box. For example, Nike, Lacoste, and Superdry. Their ads were banned in the UK for misleading environmental claims in search results. Surprise. Or for example, there were a couple of huge cases against Shein, and Shein was fined for 1 million euros, I think, in Italy for their Evolution. I think that was the name of the campaign, and their claims were false. Then in Germany, end of 2025, I think it was published now in January 2026, the Deutsche Umwelthilfe, which is the environmental agency from the German government, won a legal victory, forcing Shein to stop misleading net zero claims because their emissions actually went up 23%, which was contrary to their net zero claims. So the common thread over here, when we talk about, generic greenwashing class actions, is basically the gap between what marketing said and what operations knew. Okay, so this is the pattern. Then, secondly, so-called human rights due diligence. So this is where workers and not consumers are suing the brand or the supplier. And this is also the case, for example, for parent companies, where parent companies can no longer hide behind their suppliers. So there was an ongoing case, or there is an ongoing case in Thailand, where garment workers at Body Fashion won court rulings for wage theft. But brands like Triumph, Victoria's Secret, and Huber Holding still haven't paid until today. The interesting thing is that in this case, the factory owner is also a brand and a brand CEO. So that's not only, how can I say this, like a rogue supplier problem. That's a business model problem, right? Yeah. And then thirdly, there's the supply chain transparency through discovery cases. In my opinion, this is the quietest, but for the near future, I would guess the most consequential. Even cases that haven't been decided yet, the discovery alone has produced more transparency than any voluntary report, and I'm repeating myself here, and any audit report ever could. There's a case from last year, Mont Blanc, the French brand, where workers took the supplier to court and the brand in Italy, arguing they should be direct employees, not subcontracted. And if they win, if the workers win, it could force luxury brands to take direct responsibility for their supply chains. This would really be a very, very, very big win. So, what's happening in the case of supply chain transparency through discovery cases? Supplier lists that brands refuse to disclose are basically now in court records. And audit reports with redacted findings become unredacted. Internal emails between sustainability and legal reveal exactly what the brand knew and when. So, in case there's any brand representatives over here, think about disclosing your audit reports. And also ask your colleagues why you haven't been doing this until now. So, Here's basically a condensed and summarized practical takeaway for everyone in the room over here. So, if you work in sustainability communications, you might have noticed legal is now in the room, and legal should have a veto power. But there's obviously a trap. There's always traps, right? So, in some cases, legal teams tend to minimize liability, right? Because they strip all, how do you say this in English, specificity out of sustainability claims, right? And you, as a communicator, might end up again with vague, non-committal language that's technically defensible, but meaningless at the end of the day. So that's green hushing, right? When you stop communicating about your sustainability efforts. And it's obviously not a solution to the many problems we are facing. Um, so the brands navigating this well, and I feel kind of are prepared for the future. They have sustainability, legal, and communications aligned before the brands, the brief lands, not the brands, land. So this means sustainability knows what can be substantiated. Yeah? Legal knows what would survive a challenge, and marketing and communications know how to translate facts into credible copy. So, when these three work together and work well together, you can get more specific and not less. Because again, specificity backed by evidence is your best defense. Okay? So, before I jump into the last topic of this webinar slash workshop, I would like to leave you with one question. And I would recommend that, like, you ask this question every time you approve a sustainability communication. If every word of this then went into evidence tomorrow, if a plaintiff's attorney read it aloud in court next to an internal email where you as a brand admitted the limitation, would it help or hurt us? If it would help you because you have the data to back it up, you're in a good place. If it would hurt you because the internal reality doesn't match the external claim, well, the fix is not to water down the copy. The fix is to close the gap, right? I think that's the honest work we all need to be doing. So, final section before we jump into the Q&A. Let's talk about saviorism. Business saviorism, as I said in the beginning, is the narrative that companies are the sole problem solvers. It's the neoliberal narrative, right? We are saving the oceans. We are bringing clean energy to Africa. I don't know. So business saviorism is the corporate version of white saviorism. Same pattern, but different costume. Let's have a look at business saviorism. Again, Patagonia. Here we go. Nobody's perfect. Look at this B Corp. Well, clearly the focus is on, or seems to be in the case of Patagonia, philanthropic growth. This is really hard for me. TH in English, philanthropic growth. Apologies. Well, in the case of Patagonia and B Corp certification, only 20 out of 40 points in the environmental assessment. How can that be? We're talking about Patagonia. Well, have a look at the materials. You can start with that. So, the narrative of Patagonia says we are saving the planet, or we are in business to save the planet. Well, the data says something else. Even B Corp says something else. Then this one. It's not an example from fashion, from the fashion industry. But I think it's a good example of business saviorism. Again, we're coming back to the bottle, to the plastic bottle, which is supposed to save the planet or the ocean or clean the ocean or whatnot. We collect a bottle for everyone we sell. Well, sounds great, but plastic is only collected if you buy their bottle. So the focus is on growth, not systemic change over here. So supposedly their solution is more consumption, not less. That's not saving, that's marketing, right? So we could ask ourselves, what's the alternative, if not heroism? Well, it's honesty, right? I'm just going to read out what I noted down over here. Sustainability requires humility, not heroes. Real change happens when we listen, learn, and share power, not when we play the savior. So, to give you a couple of examples, I love this slide because it gives us a little bit of language, and my recommendation to combat or fight a little bit of saviorism within marketing language, within the world of communicating sustainability. I would recommend to, instead of, perpetuating this alarmism, we must act now, we can say needed now. Instead of absolutism, this is the only way. We could say strategies we can implement. Because there's always a multiple set of solutions to a problem, right? There is not one unique solution to a problem. Then instead of our mission, right, we could say we support efforts. Instead of why so much plastic, we could say we understand the challenges. Instead of multipliers, right, the folks we are working with, we could even, in case this is the case, frame our partners or our local partners on the ground as the actual leaders, right? And we could say they are leading the way. So within language and within the narrative, the shift is from hero to partner, from savior to co-worker. Because again, real change happens when we listen, learn, and share power, not when we play the savior. I think there was a comment in the chat box. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was super inspiring. So sorry, I have to go. Bye, Suri. Good that you have been with us. Yeah. So let me land the plane before we go into the Q&A. What we covered today. I know the beginning was a little bumpy, but I had some logistical issues here with my laptop, but I hope you could all follow me. Um, so what we covered today. We covered how to spot vague, misleading, and irrelevant claims. We covered why transparency isn't justice and global self shaming is basically coloniality in action. We covered a little bit of the legal landscape, which actually matters from my research, lawsuits, discovery, and well, why the General Counsel is now the best friend or the biggest risk if you work at a brand at the intersection of communicating sustainability.
Sorry,
And we covered
Lavinia, what do you mean by the
yeah.
your general counsel? Do you mean your stakeholders?
No, I mean the legal team, like the general counsel, the legal, maybe I translated this wrongly from German. Uh, the
Oh, you mean
general counsel.
in a larger business, if you had a legal team. Is that what you mean?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
So, they should be your best friend right
Yeah,
now, but they
absolutely.
can also be your biggest risk,
Mm,
right?
mm.
Yeah, that's what I basically mean. But very good question. I have to have a look at the slides in German. I prepared and see why and how I might have wrongly translated General Counsel. But I can clarify that in the follow-up email.
Sure.
Happy,
Thank
happy
you.
to do that. Yeah. Yeah, and we covered how to communicate with humility instead of heroism. Now, Q&A. And if you want, you can screen this QR code and then you get access to the presentation slides. Let's see if this works. Otherwise, I can also later on share the slides with all of you. So I'm gonna leave the slide on for a couple of more seconds. And then I'm gonna stop sharing the screen so I can finally and hopefully see folks in the room. Thanks for the QR code. It worked for me. Spectacular. All right, and I'm also gonna share the slides in the chat box. One second. Ah, no, I don't have it here. Okay. We're gonna share it in the follow-up email. So Q&A. There's a question. Fashion academics creating equality. So does implication of new EU laws require a legal and marketing collaboration going forward? Marketing tends to always self-aggrandize. That would definitely be my recommendation. Yeah. Apart from the fact, I don't know precisely how it works under the UK Green Claims Code, but under the EU M Code directive, you basically need to get your sustainability claims verified and checked and substantiated. So, legal support is definitely necessary. Yeah, I would say so. Clara, do you have examples of brands doing it right? Yeah, that's a very good question. No, right now not. Like clear LCA backed up data of a brand doing it right at this moment in time. I always find something. I have to, I unfortunately have to complain about. Um, Yeah, really. No, but my partner, with whom I'm writing the greenwashing newsletter, she also like she tends to ask me all the time, but we need to give some positive examples. So we might really need to work on this, and eventually we might publish an issue where we congratulate and applaud a couple of brands for doing a good job. But I must admit, like overall, dissecting all of the sustainability claims of fashion brands, I don't think there's anybody really doing a good job at this moment of time. Then, second question, Clara, has this information all come from your personal research? Where can we learn more? Yes, this mostly came from my personal research and from the research with my colleague Tanita, with whom I'm writing the anti-greenwashing newsletter. But obviously, we are always inspired, by a couple of NGOs and organizations doing a spectacular job in this direction. So SOMO, SOMO, the Dutch entity organization offering spectacular research and investigation on corporate failures with regard to human rights and general ethics. They do inspire us, and a lot of our research is based on their research. Yeah. Then, Louisa, how will governments actually check for green claims across all communication? I have no idea. And this is a very big question mark. So, for example, in the case of Germany, this is not with regard to greenwashing or how the German government will implement the MCO directive and the necessary, like safeguarding behind all of this. But I can give you an example from the German supply chain law. So the German supply chain law, right, requests companies to conduct a risk assessment and publish a report with evidences and so on and so forth. And there is an entity, a longer arm of the German government, um, who are checking all these reports. Okay. And I, in the past, have collaborated with a couple of NGOs and also trade unions in Bangladesh and in Pakistan. And we actually prepared two complaints, which landed at the BAFA, which is the institute, who's supposedly checking the data in the supply chain law reports and also the complaints. Until today, we haven't had any answer. So the institutions and organizations exist, but I have no idea how they will ever be able to actually check all of that. So I think this is a huge question mark, how all of this will actually, in reality, turn out. Do you think that implementation of MCO as a tool of banishing greenwashing will rely on the adoption of independently verified transformative standards? I think it is already relying because this is going to make, for brands at least, this is going to make communication easier, right? So if basically the communication guidelines of, I don't know, certain voluntary standards have already been checked, right? It's easier for brands to use them. That gives more power to independent certifications, which, in my opinion, is risky in general. Um, but yes, yes, yes. I mean, let's see. We all know what right now, I mean, it's not yet official, but we know there's the the green button, right? The German state state certification. They are backing down with regard to a lot of requirements they were formerly using within their communication and also their own due diligence system because they are so afraid of MCO. Let's see. I think it's not yet clear, but again, it's also not the case that, our governments are like really taking us by our hands, right? And offering an infrastructure where we know what is going to happen. Yeah. Thanks, Christopher. No clear answer, but Clara, I'm just going to read it out, okay, Clara? You can also unmute yourself, huh? We can talk if you like. Clara says, for those entering the field of sustainability in fashion as a career, how do you recommend we make a real change rather than getting stuck just doing corporate and ESG reports? Mm, yeah, difficult question. Um, given the worrisome landscape of sustainability jobs, right? And given worrisome ecosystem that a lot of brands and companies are backing down and almost closing down sustainability departments, right? Um, I mean, I have very strong opinions on the colonial infrastructure of corporate sustainability. So, in my opinion, we need to burn, the corporate sustainability world down, because I mean, I don't know, I've been working in the field for the last 20 years. Nothing has changed, no living wage is paid. Groundwater is still contaminated, right? So we could and should ask ourselves, what have we been doing the last 20 years, right? Um, so I would recommend every young person to become an activist, first and foremost. And step by step see how this kind of activism, can be incorporated within the organization or corporation you're working in. But I must admit, I stopped romanticizing, the saviorism within corporate ESG jobs. I think, I mean, we overstepped seven of the nine planetary boundaries. We need to stop lying to ourselves, to think that we're, I don't know, saving, anything within, the world of ESG. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Fashion academics. No, apologies, Clara, for my clear and straightforward answer. That was not really a recommendation for young folks wanting to enter the field of sustainability, but like be honest. Be honest to yourself. And yeah, full stop. We all need to work. We all deserve a salary. Yeah, where we can survive and in the best case scenario thrive on. And if we do find some meaning, if we do have cool and nice and empathetic colleagues, this is the way. Okay, fashion academics creating equality. Thank you, Lavinia, for your clarity and commitment to challenging brand marketing manipulation and lethargic exploitative process. Welcome, 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 dear. Then, Christopher, to what extent does the designation of a EU Type 1 claim help get company off the hook? How fair is that designation since it is so far a designation of government schemes? I don't know yet. we need to see what will actually happen and how, the communication around this um, will look like. From what I am seeing, I mostly see so-called green hushing, right? Brands and communicators like really stepping down and not communicating anything regarding sustainability because they are afraid of fines. So let's see. But again, what's really worrisome, I mean, if even a government backed up textile certification label like the green button, right, doesn't know or supposedly doesn't know what will happen in the near future, I'm really worried, right? Because at least, they should have the right advisors within their own governments, eventually folks who have ties to Brussels and can tell them, okay, this is not okay. But it's like a lot of uncertainty. Yeah. Why can't old people become activists? Oh, old people as well. Everybody. Is activism only something for the young? No, no, no. Please, activism, I'm like, in my opinion, is for everybody. And I think we also need to be very clear about the fact that activism is also not only for the extroverts. There's space for everyone. Also, if you are, somebody who's not so loud, right, and more of an introvert, there is space for you within activism. Yeah. Danielle, do you want to unmute yourself or shall I read your question out? You're not unmuting yourself, so I'm going to read your question out, okay? But I'm very happy to like actually, talk with you folks in this call. Okay, Danielle, I'm reading it out. How should companies that are still early in their sustainability journey think about the role of communication? Can it build trust, or does it risk undermining credibility in a reputation context? Hmm. Both. Always both. I think we have to be prepared for everything. And if a company, is early in their sustainability journey, what have they been doing the last 5 to 6 years? Because we all knew that this was coming. So I don't have that much of empathy of companies, just starting the sustainability journey because I don't understand how you can do business without, thinking through basic human rights and workers' rights in supply chains and, you know, a certain set of ecological rights. So hurry up, do whatever you need to do. And if you start communicating sustainability, do it in an honest and truthful way, Take folks on your journey. And the MCO actually is pretty clear, right? You need a baseline. If you do a comparison, it shouldn't be a misleading comparison. If you communicate certain sustainability goals or like reduction goals, again, you need a baseline. The rules are clear. Do whatever you need to do. The only thing I ask folks is no abuse or misuse sustainability communication.
I think I'd really like to come in here because I think
Please.
there's a there's a misunderstanding that communication is external, it's just to the customers, whether they be
Mm,
wholesale customers or e-commerce customers. But actually there's huge value in communications being used with stakeholders because without getting the demand to be stable and secure, it's
mm,
impossible to invest both in environmental innovation and social impact.
absolutely.
So when you take communications, you're honest with communications, and you've managed that commercial balance, only then can you start to deliver on your claims in reality. So, one thing that we're doing in Delisi is we're going back to farmers in India so that they're organic, they're GOT certified and fair trade certified. Some are regenerative certified as well, and then bringing those that cotton to the handlooms in Bangladesh. The yarn, of course, will be GOTS dyed. Um, we're talking to Christopher and GOTS about, getting the units certified for GOTS as well, where the weaving is taking place. But only, and of course, what we're doing is really very much what the huge businesses are doing, but they're doing it because they're realizing the risk in their supply chain. They're consolidating suppliers, which is making their offer sometimes really quite boring, cutting out the smaller suppliers just because it's cheaper to work with smaller factories and make those demands on smaller factories and manage that demand versus supply and the investment in the kind of adaptation, climate adaptation that they need to do. So just kind of wanting to bring it back to communications isn't just external to customers, it needs to be throughout the
Mm.
organizational stakeholders. Um, and if small brands can, if they're agile, if they can, have a decent volume with specific suppliers, then they do have this opportunity to work directly with fiber growers, for example, which then gives them the traceability, it gives them the access to all the social indicators, the partnerships, all of that data, the lived experience of data as well, not just the numbers side of the data. And I think
Oh, yeah, you're touching such an important point, Saf,
and I
over
think
there.
and I
Oh,
wonder
sorry.
whether, sorry, the kind of I agree with you, the fashion industry has failed, 30 years and it's just got bigger and faster as profit maximization has, you know, gone beyond, hitting the bottom with ultra fast fashion. Um, but I also think it's a problem of a kind of, well, whether neoliberalism and kind of uh, the kind of
Extractive economies.
extractive economy and the patriarchal kind of linear thinking, the non-systems thinking, which actually has led us into this position where, you're absolutely right. Sustainability roles are being retrenched, they're disappearing, and the sustainability roles that are existing seem to be more data crunching and looking at forms as opposed to thinking about how, one spreads those better practices throughout the organization, coming back
Mm.
to the question about communicating within the organization and through suppliers in order to get the kinds of, improvement, let's call it improvement, across supply chain. Yeah, I think it's really problematic, the siloed thinking, and just monitoring it with data is, I don't think is sufficient.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. And I think you are touching like a very important point, and like I absolutely 100% agree that obviously communication, is not only external but also internal, and upstream, downstream, the supply chain, as the focus of this workshop webinar obviously on greenwashing and external communication. I think talking about internal communication and the data colonialism, and I call it data colonialism, what is going on because of these. I mean, there's also a lot of risks, right? And danger and harm going hand in hand with the implementation of these European and or British greenwashing guidelines, okay? Because what is happening right now, downstream supply chain, is that brands are expecting the supply chain to offer the data and prepare the data
Mm,
for their supposedly substantiated and evidence-backed claims, okay? And this is a lot of work for the supply chain, for the supplier, for the farming communities, and so on and so forth. And the reason why I call it data colonialism is because we like, and when I say we, I'm referring to the brands or the communicators or whomever, now expect the supply chain and the suppliers again to work for free and provide the data and give us the data for free. So, working in sustainability, working in communication, working in the legal, on the legal part, if you want the data from the supply chain, you need to be ready to pay for it.
Mm, mm,
Okay? Because data
yeah.
is power. And
Yeah.
in 2026, you need to pay for the data.
Mm,
And this is also like very, very important talking. I mean, I'm like finding a little bit of the intersection of like the internal communication, but until now we have mostly talked about, okay, what is a claim? Where do we get the data from? What is a substantiated claim? But please, everybody working within sustainability communication, think about the supply chain. Think about the cost of the data and the information you're needing in order to, do proper marketing. And also one more recommendation, unfortunately, and I don't know if this is also, if you also have experience with that stuff, but from my experience working with brands, unfortunately, the traffic on the website on of like the parts of the website where brands talk about sustainability and transparency and blah 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 is very low. So basically, people are like consumers are precisely not having a look, right? at this
I
at
think
the list of
I
suppliers
think
and so
in
on
this
and so forth.
I think in this country, if, for example, the national emergency briefing, happened and people understood, the impact of the climate emergency that is unfolding, then people would start, looking. But of course, most people are just, you know, held in this sense that, it's probably all going to be okay, isn't it? Because those in power probably would do something
Yeah.
if it wasn't going to be. So I think there's a lot to be said
Mhm.
for, you know,
Yeah. But
the
like
state.
my
Yeah.
recommendation would be to very clearly and honestly communicate on the product detail page. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, talking about fashion communication, fashion
Hmm.
brands, where do you place your sustainability data, right? And there is the product detail page. And the product detail page, there's a lot of different requirements, but I think the product detail page is a spectacular place to, or space, to link sustainability communications with the material side and the properties of a single product and the supply chain behind all of this.
Mm.
And in the near future, there's going to be, at least in the EU, the digital product passport. So you, anyways, need to have
Mm.
parts of that information
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
on the
that's
product
that's
detail page.
interesting. And with the in the EU, what size of business will be obliged from this summer, isn't it? To have the full reporting. I mean, is there exceptions for SMEs?
What are you referring to now? Sorry, I wasn't attentively listening.
Sorry. So, for example, will businesses of all sizes be
Mm,
be forced
no,
by the regulation, or is it a turnover of I don't know,
no.
is it
It is a
30,
certain
40
turn. I
million
don't have the
turnover?
exact numbers in mind now. I know it for the Green Claims Directive, but for MCO and the UK Green Claims Code, I don't have the exact numbers in mind now. Louise?
For DPPs, sorry, can you hear me? I'm in the train.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
just about,
So,
yeah.
so what I know for now is that they are gonna, like in Germany, for the DPPs, they're gonna roll it out for SMEs, kind of in the same time, but on a smaller scale. They don't have to be. They will be smaller DPPs, and then in 2030 they will go bigger, and then they will go bigger when the big companies have to start with a big DPP, whatever that means, because it's really unclear what is going to be part of it. That's what I know.
Thanks.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. It's wild. Let's see.
Can I ask Sana in Finland, what kind of messages are you hearing about green claims and regulation compliance in fashion? Oh, I think we've lost her.
Yeah, she's frozen, right?
I think so. Yeah. Oh,
I think she's coming back.
yeah, maybe. Hi, Sana, we can't hear you. Ah,
Not
connecting to
yet?
audio. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it would be lovely. I don't know, Christopher, have you got something to add? I mean, how is GOTS working? How does this change your activities, your campaigning, the work you're doing with brands?
So yeah, thanks, Saf. I actually said I was going to go and I got to go about 15 minutes ago, so I shouldn't be here. But that
Nice to
said,
have you here.
it's been super
Please.
listening and challenging listening too. And I have to say I'm proud for Global Organic Textile Standard and what GOT stands for and the way it operates. Because on the one hand, it is a coherent and robust standard, although Parche SAF, I recognize its limitations in terms of wrestling with compliance for EU directives, which are increasing, and regulations, increasingly onerous and stitched up in such a way that basically only big companies will be able to comply. And those big companies, if you're part of the ongoing debate, for example, with the JRC, the Joint Research Centre, an agent of the European Union, doing this huge, monumental reports that are impossible to get to grips with on, for example, the eco design for sustainable product regulations, you hear that and you think, glory be, we have something that will finally involve eco design for sustainable products. It's not true. And basically, there's a huge kickback anyway happening from the main textile and apparel manufacturers, the sportswear companies, all of whom need to protect their businesses. I made a comment in the chat, siloed thinking is profitable thinking. Keep people divided, keep the narrative
Mm.
subdivided and fragmented, and that's how you make profit. And I mean, you mentioned, Lavinia, the digital product passport. It won't, I believe, contain any really useful information.
No,
The
no. I
textile
mean, we
labeling
saw the
regulation,
draft,
yeah,
the
and
final draft.
absolutely.
It's a
I've been
fucking
working
joke.
on that.
Sorry.
I've been working on that extensively. The textile labeling regulation, which I've been trying to push for some sort of proper, useful, relevant information going back now 8 years with the European Commission, is going to go nowhere. So we're faced by a really demoralizing picture. And ultimately, we have a situation which is being devastated by excessive consumption in all our lives, mine included, with rampant artificial so-called intelligence fostering a new way of looking at the world, which is basically the same old way. We're in a really bad situation. But I say for all of my work in both food and farming and in textiles, organic is a sort of safe haven. Criticisms can be made and inaccurate claims will be made. And doing a life cycle assessment, fuck, that costs a lot of money. You're not going to suddenly get it for nothing. But at
Oh,
least
yeah.
we have a sort of place where we can start from, which for me, and I've been working in the field for 40 years, represents something of a lighthouse for the future. And so people who find it hard to meet the requirements will sort of say it's irrelevant. And even, I have to say, Saf, you said it earlier on, rest on some sort of regenerative greenwash. And we should resist the regenerative greenwash, which is largely justifying a glyphosate driven. A glyphosate, it's a herbicide,
Mm.
one of the biggest and most popular herbicides that's used worldwide. Regenerative is a cover for glyphosate based farming systems, which also will
Not
rely
everywhere,
upon,
but yeah, there is a big
not everywhere,
risk.
but where
Like
they
let's
are.
not
You've got,
generalize and let's not,
well, there was a
dogmatize
claim that
either.
regenerative was somehow good. Yes, if you look at regenerative organic, yes, it is. But I'm going to stop sounding off. Sorry, Sam. I did ask for
Well,
my
so
opinion.
thanks for jumping in, Christopher. And I think in the context of the US, but certainly when you come to small scale farmers and India and West Africa, then I totally am with you. Organic and organic was is the highest standard. But yeah, thank you so much, Christopher, for coming in. Well, we're gonna pretty much wrap up now. We're in our last 4 minutes. I wonder if anyone has got, a last comment, a last minute comment to make, or a last question to Lavinia. I'm so grateful for Lavinia, you're having put together this presentation, this opportunity to thrash things out and get some kind of new air into the room, as it were, of sustainability and green.
Yeah, it's like because Sana.
Can you now hear
No.
me?
Yes.
Finally.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Very sorry for engineers struggling with the technology now. I'm not quite sure what Safia was asking, but I wanted to highlight the challenge in Finland. All sorts of regulation have been given more time, so there's no requirement for European side, as we know, not yet, and even more half a year was given time to go to the system. And I can see in our side that we are highly educated, we're very much in tech oriented, so we should have all the possibilities to measure everything, and we're very keen on measuring, and everybody asking the measures and data behind anything. But the big challenge is that because we have such a high social security level, and that has been here for a long time, we don't really see the problems because we don't see them here. So we don't even understand what can be the social justice challenges or supply chain challenges in the reality. So it's very rare that somebody has been to China or wherever in the world where the challenges are. So it's super, super important that the personal stories like Safia's is coming into the detail level and explaining real challenges.
They can't imagine not having those kind of the foundational social support, you mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah. Yeah. A bit like us waking up and, not having to live through war or the kind of imminent threat of being bombed or right now anyway. Yeah, it's quite a well look, any other thank you so much, Sana. That's really helpful. And yeah, just thinking about, the context in which, we talk about our products and making it, resonate and relevant to whilst being based on fact, as you say, Lavinia. It's been super, super interesting. Thank you so very much. And for joining us from Argentina, we've really looked forward to having you and extremely grateful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you
Thanks
so
for the
much,
invite.
thanks so much for everyone for joining. I mean, if you we'll be on for a minute or two after 6:30 UK time. So do stay on if you have a direct question that you don't feel you can ask now. Otherwise, do ask it.
I have one more perspective to add because I'm working with the small brands, with the SMEs. Really, like sometimes this one woman show that hardly managed the communication at all, and until now they had this. They are let's say they are the ones that actually work in a more sustainable way because they work maybe very local or with upcycling. Like let's say they are actually doing a bit better, and that was their one thing that they could use in communication, that they are working sustainably. That's what they were using all the time. This is if you type in Google sustainable fashion, you were more likely to find them, and now suddenly that's gone for them, which is really challenging. I mean, there's a different kind of structure. They don't have to change the whole communication strategy, but they are struggling to actually find the words and still be able to be seen somewhere, which is, that
What would
they
you
hardly manage to.
suggest, Lavinia?
Yeah, that has to do with SEO marketing. And you need some people who know about, who are like Google engineers and know how to manipulate, search engines and algorithm. That would be my suggestion. I mean, it depends a little bit on your website provider, but for example, my website provider offers SEO consulting for free, right? And offers like certain like search results if you use these words in combination with these words. And I must admit, I have no idea about all this digital blah blah blah, but that's at least what like my website provider, right, has
So will it
taught me.
so will it be the same for words like slow fashion or handcrafted fashion or
Or
locally
I
local
think,
fashion.
produced?
yeah, I think similar things. Yeah. No,
Because
but
what does slow fashion mean, right?
yeah.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And
Mhm.
what does crafted mean? Or handcrafted, in fact. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
handmade, which all the garments are handmade.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like the
Yeah.
only thing that you can actually say is locally made. That because that's true if you actually locally make it.
Yeah. Yeah. But
I
you're
mean, it
right.
depends how
As
much of the supply chain.
yeah.
Exactly, of course. Yes,
So it sounds like there's
it's very
another
challenging.
handbook of real terms that maybe, through WFTO's work and Nest's work and, that show some of the value add, as it were,
Yeah,
in
but
upcycling.
I think like my recommendation would be like on the technical side, SEO marketing, like really get into SEO marketing and what might work. And then create community and collectives
Mm.
because only the
Yeah,
accumulated power can reach anything, via
totally.
Kosh, for example, your
For example,
platform,
yeah, they all
right?
normally they have, right. They're working in the field for 30 years. They are making the bags from leather that they find in the streets of Berlin, But suddenly
Mm,
they have no time anyway, and they suddenly have to start remaking their website. It's
yeah,
a really
yeah,
cool thing generally for the all, because suddenly actually big brands are forced to change communication, but the small ones, oh my god, they also really
yeah,
suffer
yeah, yeah.
from it. It's
I
quite,
know,
yeah, it's quite a
I
challenge.
know.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It's
Yeah, thank you for telling us that. I hadn't, to be honest, I hadn't thought about that. Mm. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all these laws and regulations, right? They are made for the big ones. And the big ones also have the capital, right, to pay advisors, legal teams, blah, 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 blah. And the ones who will be struggling and will not benefit at all from those supposed greenwashing frameworks are the small ones, full stop.
Hmm. I mean, there is actually something to be said for using the word sustainability if you're a small brand and just, creating activism around it and just, blowing the roof off, just
Mm.
how maddening and unfair and unjust the whole system is, especially when it's as value added and as environmentally friendly as the kind of work that you're doing. I mean,
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
mean, when I'm what I'm recommending to them is to actually point out what they are good at. Like if you're
Mm.
actually locally making, then just use this as your, as your
USP.
thing to communicate.
Yeah.
Because and they
Mm.
have this advantage that they have normally very short supply chains, and they don't have to dig
Yeah,
5,000
Mm.
like subcontractors deep and stuff like that. So do have
yeah,
advantages, but it's still like it's a burden because they don't have budget to even start changing the website because they have to pay the guy who's,
yeah,
the lady
yeah.
who's doing that.
So true. Well, I think we're going to close now. Thank you so much to Lavinia and to all of you who've joined and contributed so much. And I know that yeah, we've got some really great people here that haven't switched their cameras on. Thank you, Peter and Yuma and others for having joined. And it's lovely to see your faces, Sana and Louisa. Um, thank you so much. And yeah, we will send I think we have your email addresses, so we will send you a copy of the presentation deck. I think Lavinia, you're happy to do that, aren't you? So
Oh, yeah, 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 absolutely.
we'll do that
Yeah,
and we'll stay in
transparency
touch.
is here to stay.
Thank you, thank you. Great, lovely. And we hope to pick up some of these conversations in September on the 11th. We have a big event at Conway Hall, which is all about kind of craft and localization and yeah, the new forms of SME fashion. So do sign up to the Fashion Declares newsletter if you haven't already. And thank you again, Lavinia. Bravo, bravo. Thank you.
Welcome.